Hey, what's up guys? My name is Caleb and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to replace or upgrade your lug nuts without actually lifting your car off the ground. Now, in order to do this, it's a little bit of a different process than when you actually change your tire. And so the 3 steps for this method are: 1, you're going to want to check your thread engagement. Step 2 will be actually replacing all the lug nuts, and then step 3 will be breaking them in and giving it a couple of miles to settle, and then we're going to retighten them. So let's get right into it. Now here is all the different things that you're going to want for this project. First, you're going to want a torque wrench that's rated for 10 to 150 foot-pounds. Most wheels torque between 70 and 110 foot-pounds, so this should be perfect. This is by PT Performance. It's also a 1/2-inch drive. Then of course you're going to want your set of lug nuts. I'm only doing the back 2 wheels. I already did the front wheels earlier, so that's why we have 10 here. Then next you're going to want a regular socket for actually taking the old ones off the car, because you don't want to use the torque wrench to do that. Then you're going to want the right size socket to go on the lug nuts. In my case this is 16 millimeters. And in order to not scratch the rims, in some cases you might want a 3-inch extension and a normal size socket, or you can just buy a deeper one like this to compensate. And then you'll want a different size socket for actually installing the new ones on the car. Most of the time you can use the same one that you use to take the lug nuts off if they're the same size, but in my case I have this special locking socket for these lug nuts that only work with these bolts. Another thing that you'll want to do first before doing a project like this is you'll want to clean your wheels really well, and especially inside all the lug nut holes, and then make sure it has time to dry afterwards. You don't want to be doing something like this when the wheels are still wet unless it's an absolute emergency. Now, the first step when you get new lug nuts is you want to make sure they're of course the right size. Even if they're from the manufacturer, you should check and compare the two before you get started, because sometimes even your dealership can give you the wrong part. It's actually happened to me before. So I went ahead and pulled one of these off the car right there just to check them. And what you're going to want to look at is the bottom side of it right here. There's generally 3 different types of lug nuts. There's this acorn shape, which is also like a tapered or sloped design. There's going to be a curved shape where it's basically gonna go in like that, but it'll be a little bit more curved. And then there's a version where it's completely flat. And so this one is of course the tapered or acorn design. And then if we look at this one, it is going to be the exact same. And you want to hold them up to each other and make sure that the distance across is also going to be the same. In some cases, you're also going to want to check the pitch of this angle right here. It's almost always going to be 60 degrees, but make sure that you actually get the right specification between the two, because that is super important in order for it to seat properly onto the car. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is check the thread engagement on the car. And basically what that means is making sure that the stud on the car actually goes into the lug nut enough times to have as many of the threads as possible at keeping this secure. And there's 2 general ways that you can check this. The first one is to make sure that the amount of stud that this is screwing onto is at least the diameter of this hole right here. And then the other way you can check it is by getting the measurements and doing a small calculation. So in this case, I have a 12 millimeter by 1.25 size lug nuts. And so if you divide the 12 by the 1.25, you get about 9.6. And so that means that this needs to screw on 360 degrees 9.6 times in order for it to be enough thread engagement. It can be over that, but under that would be a little on the unsafe side. And then if you have a different size lug nut, say 12 millimeter by 1.5, then if you divide those numbers together, you would get 8 rotations. So we're gonna go ahead and check that now. I'm just gonna screw it on as far as it'll go until it stops naturally. I'm actually gonna grab my socket here to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to make sure that when I unscrew it, it unscrews 9.5 times before it falls off the car. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9.5. And it is now off. So these are perfect size, and we're going to go ahead and install them. So right now we still have only one lug nut off the car. There's actually two different ways that you can normally do this. The normal way is the same as when you change out a tire, where you would basically loosen all 5 of these just a little bit, enough to just break them loose. You would then jack the car up, take all the lug nuts fully off, switch the wheel out, put the new wheel back on, put all the lug nuts on, and just hand tighten them. Don't actually make them all the way tight, and then you would lower the car down to the ground, and then you would torque them properly. But since we're not lifting the car up today, we're actually going to do a similar method, but it's only doing one lug nut at a time. So right now we're just going to put the first one on the car. And the reason why we're doing it like this is because with all the weight of the car on top of the lug nuts as we change them out, we don't want the wheel shifting anywhere on the hub here. And so if we keep the other 4 ones tight while we just work on one, then it'll keep everything centered, and then we know that the tire is going to be perfectly mounted by the time we're done. So now we're going to want to torque the first one down a little bit, but we're only going to go to about 60 to 80% of the actual torque spec. So in my case, this car is a 2019 Subaru Forester, and it requires 89 foot-pounds of force. And so we're going to go to about 65. Actually, we'll call it 60 for good measure. So I'm just going to adjust my torque wrench here up to 60. Tighten that down. Oh, and then don't forget your special socket here if you have one. And then we're just going to carefully wait until we hear it click. There we go. And then we're going to work on the next one, but we're going to go in a star pattern. So we want to pick the lug nut that's the farthest away from the first one. In my case, I have 5, so we're going to go in a star formation like this. If you only have 4, you're going to do the one that's directly across, and then the side-to-side ones. And then if you have 6, it's going to be kind of the same deal. You want to go to the one that's straight across, and then the farthest one after that. So now let's break the next one loose. And it's important to use your normal tire iron or a normal socket wrench to do the loosening part, to break them loose. You do not want to use a torque wrench to break them loose because it's really bad for the torque wrench. The torque wrench is a special type of wrench that is only meant for tightening things down to a very specific pressure. So once again, we're just going to hand tighten this until it's pretty snug. Then we're going to pull out the torque wrench again. It's still set to about 60. There we go. We got 2 done. Now we're going to jump to this high one up here. Man, that one was on there good. Got the third one on now. I'm just going to tighten this one down. Now the farthest one at this point is going to be directly across on this right side here. Here is the 4th one. Now we got the last one. When you're torquing these down, you want to make sure that you're pulling from the handle or wherever the grip is. You don't want to be pulling from like down here or using like 2 hands like this. If you're going to use 2 hands, you should have them both up here, or just have your second hand down here to kind of keep everything straight. The other thing I should probably mention is when you're using a torque wrench, you want the head of the torque wrench to be as close to the bolt as possible. So in this case, this is probably the longest of an extension you would want to use in most cases. So like if I had an extension that was way out here, that would kind of be not the best idea because you're losing a little bit of the force because of the awkward angle and everything's going to shift around a little bit. So ideally you want to have like only about 3 inches away. In this case, I have both of these extended drives, which is not the biggest deal, but yeah, you just want it to be as close to the bolt as possible. So now that we got all 5 bolts on the car, the last and final step before we take it for a test drive and break it all in is we're going to torque them all again, but to the actual manufacturer specifications. So in this case, like I said earlier, it is 89. We just did them all at 60. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust my wrench here, and I'll actually show you guys how this specific one works. in case you decide to get it yourself. Down here you can see let's see if I can get it in frame here, it's a little hard to see. You can see the measurements right here of the foot-pounds, and then on the other side you'll have the metric. Basically you'll unscrew this at the bottom, and then you'll screw the handle around like this, and you can see the little numbers here indicating the in-between points. And we're just gonna go up to 90 just to keep it nice and rounded here. So that'll be right about there. So as you can see, the 0 lines up with the line for the 90 there. It's kind of hard to see. And we're just gonna tighten this guy back down. Now we're gonna go ahead and do that same star pattern again. It doesn't really matter which one you start with. Gonna go directly across. Cool, now we got all 5 done. Time to do the other side. All right, here we are at the other side of the car. Once again, we're just gonna do one at a time. Go ahead and break that loose, leaving all the other 4 tight. Just gonna hand tighten that first one there. We're gonna readjust our torque wrench back down to 60. 60 foot-pounds is what we had it on before. There we go. Gonna do the one directly across from it, making sure we stay in that star pattern. It's definitely a little tedious doing them one at a time, but it is a lot safer. You have a lot higher chance of not having to retighten these a bunch of times later. Of course, the last thing we want is our wheel falling off the car. Just got one left now, going to 60 foot-pounds once again. Then after this last one, we can tighten them all back up to 89 or 90. And also the reason why you want to clean your wheels and clean out these holes really well before you start and make sure it's dry is because, one, you don't want water to be getting in between the little cone shape and your rims here. And then you also don't want dirt, of course, because the water might actually come out or evaporate and you can tighten them down later, but the dirt is not, and it's actually going to scrape the crap out of the cone part of your lug nuts, so you don't want that. Now, just like I said before, we're gonna go up to 100 foot-pounds now, or 90, sorry. It's a little harder to twist here the higher you go. So there we are, right at 90. Just gonna tighten that guy back down and do the star pattern once again. And there you go, the project's basically done now. The last thing you want to do before you drive away is put your torque wrench all the way back down to 0. Some wrenches you don't need to do this, but the ones that have the spring inside, you definitely want to do this in order to not wear out the spring. Otherwise you'll have to send it in and get it recalibrated. Just make sure you don't screw it down below past the bottommost marker there. So I set mine right at about 10 foot-pounds. We're gonna put that away. And something else that you wanna make sure that you don't forget is if you have a special socket key like this for these aftermarket performance lug nuts, you're going to want to make sure that you keep this in the vehicle or on your person at all times, because if you do have an emergency and need to switch this out for the spare and you don't have this, you're going to be completely screwed. And now that all the lug nuts are officially on the car, the very last step is you're going to want to drive this thing for about 25 miles, anywhere from 15 to 25 is fine. Then you're going to want to pull over and re-tighten them all again in the star pattern. And then you're going to want to repeat that step again, so another 15 to 25 miles, re-tighten them. And then you want to do this a third time, maybe like a week or 2 later, just to double check that they're absolutely on the car, not getting loose and not going to come off. Now, while I test drive the car here, there's a couple of things that I want to mention about doing a project like this with aftermarket lug nuts and just lug nuts in general anytime that you change a tire or anything like that on your car. So the first thing is, of course I said this in the beginning of the video, you want to make sure that the area is clean and clear of debris and is also dry, ideally before you start this project. If you're in an emergency and need to change your spare tire on the side of the road while it's raining, then this is of course okay, because you're going to end up changing that back out for a normal tire anyway, in which case you would want to do that when it's dry. The next thing I want to mention is you want to avoid getting aluminum alloy lug nuts, because though these are going to be a little more lightweight and a little bit more for performance, aluminum lug nuts, the alloy kind, are specifically for like racetrack options because you'll be going through them a lot more often. They're not really meant for a daily driver like this here Subaru going off-road and things like that. So you're going to want to look for a forged steel lug nut or a titanium based lug nut. And the other reason you want to try and avoid aluminum lug nuts is because they will also strip a lot easier than the forged steel or the titanium ones. So if you accidentally over tighten them, or if it's a case where you're taking on and off the lug nuts all the time, then this will definitely wear them out a lot quicker than if you had a much harder metal. And speaking of that, the next thing that I want to mention is you don't want to, one, over tighten your lug nuts, and two, you don't want to use an impact drill to screw the new ones on. And the reasons for this are going to be pretty similar to using forged steel and titanium over the aluminum ones. Is you don't want them to wear out and you don't want to accidentally strip them, because if you cause damage to your actual bolts, your studs on your wheel hub, those are a huge pain to replace and install new ones on, and could be a huge safety hazard if you end up stripping any of the threads and you have no idea that you did. Also, an impact drill is just completely unnecessary, and in my opinion, it's not going to be as precise as a calibrated torque wrench, and so I highly recommend just investing in a torque wrench. It's going to serve you a lot of purposes over the years, especially if you do other types of work on your car, like doing your own oil changes and things like that. So I would just invest in a torque wrench. They're not super expensive. You can get one from anywhere between like $30 and $70, depending on how crazy you want to go with it, but that's just my opinion. Going off of that, I also highly recommend that you don't buy lug nuts that are just some cheap, off-brand Amazon purchase for $20 or $30. I recommend spending at least $50 on a new pair of lug nuts and going with a company that's either widely known or a name brand one if you're not going to go the route of the original engine manufacturer. And this is going to be also for the same reasons. You don't really want some cheap piece of metal being the thing that's holding your wheels on your car, because you never know what could go wrong with that. And if you buy something that is forged steel and it's by like a racing company or a widely known lug nut brand, then you can at least trust that your car is going to keep you safe on the road. And the very last thing I want to mention about this is the star pattern thing is incredibly important. If you do them just in a circle when you're replacing them, then you're going to end up with slightly uneven pressure on all of your lug nuts, and they could shift around when you're driving on the road and wear them out quicker. It could potentially strip some of your studs, and it can also throw your wheel out of balance, and so your car will end up vibrating on the freeway, which can also increase the chances of one of your lug nuts falling off. So when you do the star pattern, essentially what you're doing is avoiding all these issues, because you are getting even pressure throughout the whole wheel, and then by the time you get to the last lug nut, it's kind of like, everything is just perfectly balanced. Everything has the exact amount of pressure as the last one on it, and you can trust that you did it correctly. Doing the star pattern also helps keep the wheel centered on each of the individual bolt holes as well, or the individual studs. And so when you go to screw the lug nuts on, they'll actually seat properly within the little cone-shaped hole that's surrounding each of the studs. So with that being said, I hope you guys found this information very useful and you got a nice new pair of lug nuts on your car. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Safe driving.